Okay guys, so this is the last video in a series of 3 videos. This video I'm going to show up how to hook up the bus of the LCD panel to the Arduino to control it. Basically the digital outs of Arduino, which we see here, digital outs of Arduino, which is on one side of Arduino, and the other side you have power and analog. The digital outs are going to control the bus on certain LCD panel pins. Last video we finished hooking up the potentiometer and the power to the Arduino backlight and the logic circuit so we could control the contrast and see the backlight come up. So let's start. So for this video I'm going to be using 6 orange jumper wires so that we can distinguish as to what are the bus cables and what are the power cables, pretty much. So to start with, let's connect pin number 4 on the LCD panel to digital 7 on the Arduino. So that's a digital out of Arduino. Let's go to pin 5. Pin 5 is actually not used, but we still have to ground it. So let's stick it to anywhere on the breadboard where we have the ground rail running. That way that's taken care of. Now let's go to pin 6. Pin 6 goes to digital 8. So pin 6 goes to digital 8. Like so. Alright, and then we have pin 11, 12 and 13 and 14, which are going to go to pin 9, 10, 11 and 12 on Arduino. So let's start with pin 11. So pin 11 on the LCD panel goes to digital 9 on Arduino. Pin 12 goes to digital 10, like so. It's getting very crowded here, but that's the way it is. And pin 13 goes to digital 11, and pin 14 goes to digital 12. Okay, so now let's understand what these pins are for. Basically, since we've hooked up all the data lines, let's understand what they're for. So there are 11 bus lines, D0 to D7. So and we have RS, EN and RW. So D0 to D7 is the raw data that we send from Arduino to our LCD to basically tell it, hey, this is what we want to render. The RS pin tells the microcontroller whether the LCD wants to display that data or it's a command byte. So the RS pin is used to either move the cursor or tell the LCD panel that it wants to write the data. So you can switch between those two modes. The EN pin is to just enable, it's an enable line which is used to tell the LCD that it's ready for reading, basically. The RW pin is used for set the direction or whether you want to write the data to the display or read from it. Reading from display sounds bizarre, but it's actually possible, and we're not going to be using it for this example. So to recap, we've used 6 pins: RS, EN. We haven't used RW, and we have used pin D7, 6, 5 and 4 to talk to the LCD. Now let's hook it up, and I will show you the sketch very soon, or the source code which actually displays data on the LCD. But let's hook it up to see if something comes up, and let's also see how we can change the contrast using the potentiometer while the things are being displayed. So you can see here, this is the LCD panel. And if I move the potentiometer, you can see very clearly now that it displays my name and a counter next to it. So if I move the potentiometer, I can actually just make the display disappear because the contrast isn't right. And if I move it in the other direction, it's going to paint all the squares, so the contrast is going to be very high. I just want to move it to a point where it's readable, which is almost around here. So you can see I have my display showing my name and a counter underneath. So let's see the sketch or the source code that basically sends the raw data over the data pins, the bus, to the LCD panel to display what we're seeing right now. As I promised, this is the sketch for controlling the LCD panel. What we're doing here is pretty straightforward. We're including the liquid crystal.h. That's the header file that basically is the library for controlling LCD displays via Arduino. We're using the constructor, and what we're doing here, if you remember, we started using, when we started wiring our bus with Arduino, we used digital out pins on Arduino 7, 8, 9, 10 through 12. So we're using those pins here in the constructor to tell the library that, hey, we're using these pins, so send the signal out, using these pins to the LCD panel. Then in the setup method, we call a function called begin or method called begin, and we say 16 by 2. What this means is this is the display resolution of our LCD. So 16 columns by 2 rows. So basically we have a 16 by 2 display. So we initialize, call the begin method with that argument, with those arguments. Then we use the print method to print something, printing my name here. In the loop method, what we're doing is we're moving the cursor to 0, 1. Now if you remember, I mentioned that there's one pin that actually sends a byte out to the LCD panel moving its cursor. So it can switch states from either moving cursor to actually telling the LCD panel that it's sending raw data. So here what set cursor does is sends a byte out to the LCD panel telling that it move its cursor to line 1, column 0. So you can move your cursor anywhere in the grid, 16 by 2. That's the resolution of our LCD. And then what we're doing is we're just dividing milliseconds by 1000, printing basically second since reset. So this is the Arduino sketch that lets you print whatever you want to print on your LCD panel. Thanks for watching.